everybody, I'm Liz, and today I decided to do the Try a Chapter tag. This was created by Malia from BookParadise. I was introduced to this tag a while ago from Joce by Squibblesreads. I will leave their videos linked down below so you can go check them out if you want more information on this tag. But essentially, what you do is you pick 5 books, you read the first chapter and the prologue, to try to get a feel for the book and see if you want to continue reading it or save it for a later date. This is supposed to be really motivating for reading, maybe get you out of slumps, and also just really amp up your reading and get you really excited to read. I chose to do this tag for a somewhat different reason, and that is to whittle down my TBR shelves, maybe unhaul some books. So the first book I read was The Shack by W.M. Paul Young. This is a book about Mackenzie Allen Phillips. His daughter Missy is abducted, and then there's evidence of her murder in a shack in the wilderness in Oregon. This book takes place 4 years after that incident, where a mysterious note ends up in his mailbox telling him to go back to this shack. It's supposed to be a book about finding God, recovering from grief and trauma and pain. So I read the foreword and also chapter 1, and I was really interested by the writing style. I was pretty hooked just by reading the foreword. The foreword is a letter to the reader saying that he is ghost writing the story as Mackenzie Allen Phillips is his friend, and he is relaying the story of what happened to him. The first chapter is when he actually receives the note. He is alone in this ice rain of a storm because his wife and children are visiting family and they cannot get back home because of the storm. So I feel like I'm definitely going to keep this on my TBR shelf. Next, I read Between Georgia by Jocelyn Jackson. And this is about a girl named Nani Fret who has a very interesting family dynamic. She grew up with 2 mothers, one who has Usher's syndrome, which has rendered her deaf and blind, and then the other one suffers from trichomania, which if you do not know what that means, it's a psychological disorder where you are compelled to rip out your own hair because of anxiety and stress. And the book title is actually the location of the book, and Nani actually comes into these 2 women's lives as a young girl of 15, actually shows up on their sister's doorstep to give birth to her, and she ended up not wanting her and gave her up. So this book, I was a little confused by the first 2 pages, but as I kept reading and I became more interested in the story and I got a better feel for the author's writing style, this is another book that I have to say I'm actually wanting to read and I will keep on my TBR shelf. Next, I read The Reader by Bernard Schlink. And this is about a boy of 15 who meets a woman twice his age when he becomes sick, and she helps him get back to his home. And then they start this relationship, but she ends up disappearing. And then he ends up running into her in his 20s as he's a law student. I didn't really care much for the writing structure or the dialogue of the book. I felt it was very sporadic and kind of confusing. The chapters are very short, only a couple pages long, and I just felt really confused while reading this, so I probably won't continue on with it, and so I'm not sure if I'm going to keep this on my TBR shelves. The next book I read is Sarah's Key by Tatiana de Rosne. This book takes place in 2 different time periods. One is in France during World War II in 1942, where a 10-year-old girl named Sarah is awoken in the middle of the night because the police have come to take them as they are a Jewish family, and she locks her brother in their secret hiding place of a cupboard and vows that she will return to release him as soon as she can. The second time period of the story takes place 60 years later in the point of view of a girl named Julia. She is a journalist and she's exposed to Sarah's story as she investigates the roundups that occurred during World War II in France. I read 10 pages because, like the other book, these chapters are very, very short. I was very interested in Sarah's story, but I feel like Julia's side of the story. I need to read a little bit more to actually get a feel for her character. I definitely don't want to take this book off of my TBR list, but it might be a later date book, or I need to read it when I'm really in the mood for some historical fiction. The last book I read is Visible Darkness, Hidden Light by Charles Amonet. This book was interesting, to say the least. The writing style makes me feel like I'm reading a journal, as it takes place in dates, and it starts off in 2002, where there is a man in jail seeking his revenge and his plot to escape. And the next scene introduces a man called Stan Forrester, who is a business consultant. He talks about having nightmares and how he's really excited that the man from the previous chapter is in jail. And then it goes 2 years back in time to where you actually see how he's a business consultant, and he gets this mysterious package that contains a trans-neurogenic radiation device which apparently makes people tell the truth. Stan immediately thinks it's a joke and kind of shrugs it off. I guess as the chapters kind of further go into detail, he uncovers business fraud and all this other stuff. I'm not sure if I enjoyed the writing style. Some of the phrases were a little weird for me, and the sentence structure was a little distracting for me, so this might also be a candidate for me to remove off of my TBR list. So this try chapter tag had me try 5 books. 2 I was very interested in, 2 I was not so much interested in, and 1 I felt had a potential for interest. So I feel like this is a really great tag to help me whittle down my TBR shelves, maybe on haul books that I actually am no longer interested in. And so I may potentially be creating a lot more of these try a chapter challenges in the future. So if you have read any of these books I've mentioned in my video, I would love to hear your input on them, whether you liked them or you didn't, as that will also help me further narrow down whether I should continue reading them or not. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you later. Goodbye!